Created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, Spider-Man would make his debut in Amazing Fantasy number 15 in the summer of 1962. The wall crawler has dominated comics, TVs, movies, and video games in the past 61 years, becoming one of the most famous superheroes of all time. Toys are no different, where Spider-Man is seemingly unmatched. Any store selling action figures is bound to have something related to the webhead, but what would Spider-Man be without his iconic Rogues Gallery? Probably the most iconic in all of Marvel. Hey everyone, it's Pro Wrestling Toys back in today's video with another top 10 countdown, and today we are looking at the top 10 Marvel Legends Spider-Man villains of all time. Before getting started, there will be no Toy Biz figures on this list, only Hasbro. They were good back in their day, but I want to focus on the now and figures that are more readily available today. Now, let's quickly go over the honorable mentions, and there were a lot of them. I had to whittle it down to 5. First up, the Lizard Build-A-Figure. Man, this figure is just so menacing, so imposing. However, he is just slightly shorter than I would have liked him to be. You know, this is supposed to be like a more monstrous version of Dr. Kurt Connors, and him just being like the same height as your average Spider-Man figure just doesn't sit right with me. Also, his articulation is pretty lacking, but nonetheless, like, I think the sculpt is phenomenal here, and yeah, it's just a really good lizard. Next up is Venom from the Absorbing Man Build-A-Figure wave. This is a figure that hasn't really aged all too well. It is on that old Hyperion body mold, but I still nonetheless just love this figure. You know, it is just the spitting image of that old Todd McFarlane art, and I personally prefer this version over the Monster Build-A-Figure wave version because of the tongue out head sculpt, you know, with the green slime going down. It just looks so cool. Yeah, a little outdated, but still one of my favorites. Next up, we have the Vulture from the Demo Goblin Build-A-Figure wave. I love the wings on this figure, and I love the 2 head sculpts. However, that Pizza Spider-Man body mold is, I don't know, I'm just super indifferent on it. I definitely think it works for Spider-Man and Spider-Man alone, but when they put it on other characters, it just looks so weird. Nonetheless, this is such a great Vulture figure. I am just hoping that we get a version of him from the animated series sometime in the future. That would be awesome. And speaking of animated series, we have the animated series Doc Ock from the VHS 2-pack. I can confidently say that this is probably a look that not a lot of Spider-Man fans would think of when they first think of Dr. Octopus, you know, this super beefed up, jacked version of him. It's alright, you know, but I think what is a pretty big letdown were those claws. You know, Hasbro made such a big fuss about them being bendable now, but like, it's just super hard to put them into any pose that is just good. They don't exactly like sit right in the sockets, which makes them like fall down pretty easily. And those claws are pretty tiny as well, which I know, again, it's a design from the TV show. Yeah, there's just like small little issues that keeps it from really reaching the top 10, unfortunately. And last but not least, we have Kraven the Hunter from the Rhino Build-A-Figure wave. I definitely have this as my once per list, like, super underrated pick. I just feel like this figure is super slept on, especially with the release of the Retro Collection Kraven and then that Target exclusive 2-pack Kraven. I mean, I almost like forgot about this figure, and it's understandable. This figure came out almost a decade ago, which is just like crazy to think about. But nonetheless, like, the sculpt here is on point. You know, love the skulls and everything else. It is such a good action figure. It's just like barely missed out on my top 10, but I had to like include it here because it is a personal favorite of mine. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get into the top 10, starting with number 10. Kicking things off at number 10, we have a tie between the Retro Collection Sandman and the Sandman Build-A-Figure. Created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, Flint Marko, aka William Baker, better known as the Sandman, made his debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 4 in September of 1963. These two figures were released in fall 2021 and winter 2016, respectively. The looks for both are based on the classic design that dates back to his very first appearance. Although the Build-A-Figure does take some liberties with that design, making him look huge, just muscles everywhere. This is the very first tie between two action figures in my time making top 10s on this channel. But I think this is a very deserving tie between two action figures, because you could either go with one or the other, you know. I love the accessories between the two, and the alternate sand options are wonderful, you know, hammer, spiky ball, and big ol' Shaquille O'Neal hands in the case of the Build-A-Figure. Those ones being able to hold onto most Spider-Man figures with ease. It makes posing him in fight scenes so much fun, and being able to switch between normal and Sandman and super powered up is phenomenal. Either one, to be honest. I'm just talking about the Build-A-Figure, but like the standard Retro Collection one is just as good if you're wanting to make a more classic Steve Ditko-ish display. The bigger one is for like your more modernish collectors. Again, I love being able to switch up between the two. And of course, my Build-A-Figure is actually a custom using the Raft box set body. I have a review for that one up. Go check it out. But nonetheless, it manages to be one of the best Spider-Man villain figures of all time, and the Retro Collection as well. And coming in at number 9, we have Retro Collection Mysterio. Created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, the master of illusions Mysterio, real name Quentin Beck, made his debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 13 in June 1964. This figure was released in summer of 2020. This is the version of Mysterio we see in the animated series, minus the trunks and belt. I am still amazed at how much effort went into this figure. You know, the sculpt alone earns this figure a place on the top 10. The intricacy of it is stunning. The bowl and cape especially are the spitting image of Mysterio and are absolutely iconic, you know, to the character. So I'm glad they were able to nail it. The gauntlets and boots deserve mentioning as well. Those are also uniquely sculpted. And the articulation, while not like the greatest of all time, is still great, you know, and the accessories are also great. However, I would have liked the cape to be a darker purple and for an actual Quentin Beck head instead of that translucent blue one that we got. So weird. I get it, he's a master of illusion, but yeah, I mean, would it have hurt to just put some regular Joe Schmo head, include that with the figure? With those like tiny nitpicks out of the way, yeah, it does nothing to drag this figure down, in my opinion. Like, those are honestly just like personal nitpicks. This figure is amazing. I love it so much, and that is why it is at number 9. And coming in at number 8, we have Retro Collection Lizard. Created by, you guessed it, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, the reptilian alter ego of Dr. Kirk Connors, the Lizard, made his debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 6 in November 1963. This figure released in fall of 2022 as a part of the Beyond Amazing line as a Walmart exclusive. This look is based on his first appearance as well as the animated series, sort of. Now, this Lizard figure isn't as imposing as the Build-A-Figure, but it still manages to look threatening nonetheless. I love that tongue-out head sculpt as it perfectly captures the more animalistic side to the Lizard. His alternate head sculpt bears mentioning as well, as it is a great representation of the classic design drawn by Steve Ditko. His tail also being bendable is fantastic. You know, compared to the Build-A-Figure that had segments and joints in it, like this one, you could pretty much do whatever you want with the tail. But yeah, it is fantastic as it is bendable, but also it allows him to be able to balance better in dynamic poses. Oh, and how could I forget the other accessories he comes with, his alternate hands, which are alright, but those science flasks are wonderful additions on top of everything else, and they are pretty universal, being able to be used in like any Marvel Legends, like science-y display, whether you want to put them with Reed Richards or Dr. Hank McCoy. So not only is the figure amazing, it comes with some pretty good fodder. That is why the Retro Collection Lizard is at number 8. And coming in at number 7, we have the Retro Collection Scorpion. Created by, you guessed it, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, Matt Gargan would be turned into the Scorpion in The Amazing Spider-Man number 20 in October of 1964. This figure released in the winter of 2022, and it is based on his classic appearance from the comics. This figure was number 15 on my top 10 list of 2022, and for very good reason. It is a huge improvement on the original that came out in the Molten Man wave. While both figures are mostly the same, the one key aspect that is different is the paint apps. Hasbro absolutely nailed that classic look for Scorpion that we all know and love. I mean, when I ask you, picture Scorpion in your head, the character Scorpion, what comes to mind? It is this. It is honestly a quintessential Scorpion action figure. Of course, he has that bendable tail, and yeah, the size of this thing is amazing. Pause. However, the one big drawback is that it is, because of how big it is, it has trouble standing up. It has difficulty getting into some more dynamic poses. That definitely is a big drawback from this figure. However, another thing that I actually like about this figure is the color palette they went with. The bright and dark green work so well with one another. It makes the figure more easily pop out on the shelf, and that's what I love. But yeah, for all that, Scorpion earns himself the number 7 spot. And coming in at number 6, we have the King in Black Venom. Created by Todd McFarlane and David Michelini, Venom would make his debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 300 in May 1988. This is the first figure on the list to have not been made by Steve Ditko or Stan Lee. That's worth mentioning. This figure released in 2022, and this look is directly from the King in Black storyline. This figure is definitely a point of controversy for most, but you have to admit it is an absolute blast to pose around. That movie Venom sculpt is an all-time great, They even reused it for the Void Build-A-Figure this year, and it is no different here. The proportions are on point, as Venom here is a lot leaner, but tall at the same time. And those wings he comes with are just breathtaking. They exude awesomeness and take this figure to another level. Now, I said this was a controversial pick, and what I meant by that is those holes in the back. Yeah, that's really the only thing that holds this figure back for many people, just how noticeable those holes are. But not only that, but the symbol on the front goes down a little too long. It's cut off by the lower ab crunch. It's really hard to pose around with it looking natural. Most of the time, it's going to be cut off. So yeah, those are really the only two reasons that really hold this figure back from that top 5. But, despite all of those drawbacks, the rest of the figure is still top notch. Those head sculpts are wonderful. I love how animated they look. And yeah, like I said, the hands are good and the wings are amazing. That is why King in Black Venom is number 6. And coming in at number 5, we have 2-pack Doc Ock. Created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, Dr. Otto Octavius would make his first appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man number 3 in July 1963. Side note, that makes him the oldest character to show up on this list. This figure released in the fall of 2022. The appearance of this figure is based on the John Romita Sr. redesign from the late 60s. The VHS version that released in 2023, was in consideration when I was making this list just due to the posable tentacles, the claws. However, there is no denying that the sculpt of the two-pack body and its proportions are absolutely perfect. They are the spitting image of Doc Ock from the comics. The head sculpts also fare better here than its single release, seeing that it's able to utilize the digital face printing that wasn't really available back then. It makes the eyes and lips look lifelike. However, just like King and Black Venom, there is something holding this figure back from going even higher, and that would be the tentacles, the claws. Man, them not being bendable is just hinders this figure so much. It just hinders what you can do with him. One simple solution is to replace them, and if you do, my goodness, it is an entirely different figure. Of course, I have made it custom in the past using like some USB reading lights, and it worked out really well. If customizing comes easy to you, then this figure is definitely a top 3 contender, and it ain't number 3. Without modding though, Doc Ock is easily number 5. And coming in at number 4, we have the Venompool Wave Carnage. Side note, this list was made before the announcement of the Target exclusive Carnage. You best believe once that figure comes out, he is going right here at this spot. Created by David Michelini and Mark Bagley, serial killer Cletus Cassidy would bond with the symbiote spawn of Venom, becoming Carnage in The Amazing Spider-Man number 361 in April 1992. Released in fall 2020, this version of the character is based on his look from Absolute Carnage. The sculpt here is absolutely phenomenal, and it does not diminish the articulation in any way. That's what makes this figure so great, honestly. Like, mostly it is due to that articulation. You're able to get in some like Metacom Mafex poses. He's so posable. And despite not coming with any symbiote weapons like the Bucky Cap version, you are able to make him switch between a more classic and Absolute Carnage look with his 2 head sculpts. The proportions are fantastic as well, and the paint apps are absolutely breathtaking, with each sculpted line having some black paint over it. Yeah, a figure so nice, they had to make it twice. Yeah, I cannot wait for that Target exclusive to come out because it just looks like this figure, but even better. The biggest complaint about this version is that he did not come with any symbiote weapons. However, the Target exclusive that is coming out at some unforeseen time will include those. I cannot wait for that figure to come out. But until then, I am content with owning this one as it perfectly captures the unhinged nature of Carnage and is the number 4 greatest Spider-Man villain figure of all time. And coming in at number 3, we have the Retro Collection Rhino. Created by Stan Lee and John Romita Sr., Alexei Sistovic. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm sorry to anyone watching from Russia or who are of Russian descent. Yeah, Alexei Sistovic, better known as Rhino, made his debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 41 in October of 1966. This figure was released in summer of 2022 and is a look based on both comics and Spider-Man the Animated Series. This was a much needed re-release to a figure that was very difficult to get your hands on. Like any new collectors out there, like trust me, from a Marvel Legends veteran, like we were starving for a new Rhino figure for the longest time, and finally the Hasbro overlords heard our prayers, heard our cries, and they gave us this. Easily one of the greatest Rhino figures to ever be made. It shares almost everything with that previous release of the Build-A-Figure Rhino that came out back in like 2014, 2015. But this one improves on the color and paint apps. It is a more lighter gray as opposed to the dark gray used for the Build-A-Figure. The heads were very much welcomed this time around as opposed to the Build-A-Figure, which left fans divided on whether they were bad or not. I think what this figure does best, however, is portraying that classic version of Rhino. He isn't a bulking behemoth here, but he'll definitely outsize any Spider-Man figure in the collection. He is still physically imposing, not on a cartoonish level though, and that's what I appreciate the most about this figure, and that is why he is at the number 3 position. And coming in at number 2, we have the Retro Collection Kingpin. Created by Stan Lee and John Romita Sr., Wilson Fisk, better known in the criminal underworld as the Kingpin, made his debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 50 in July 1967. This figure of him released in the summer of 2020 and is based off of his appearance from Spider-Man the Animated Series. This isn't the first Kingpin figure using this specific mold. Just like Rhino in the previous entry, this figure came out first as a Build-A-Figure in 2019. But again, just like Rhino, this figure is vastly superior to that Build-A-Figure. I think this one invokes the image of a more classic Kingpin a lot better than the Baff with that blue neckerchief, orange vest, and purple pants. A lot more colorful and stands out even more on the shelf next to other villains. I mean, not that he had any trouble standing out, as the proportions of this figure are spot on, with him having a gargantuan frame big enough to eclipse most heroes in the line. Spider-Man and Daredevil especially. But let's not forget his accessories. He comes with his cane with a diamond on top, which is alright. But I think what I love the most is his beat up head sculpt. I just absolutely love this. It looks like he just got done tussling with the Webhead or the Devil of Hell's Kitchen. One of the two. I am comfortable saying that this is definitely the best Wilson Fisk figure that we have gotten ever in any line ever. This one trumps them all. That's the reason why Retro Collection Kingpin comes in at number 2. Finally, the moment you've all been waiting for, number 1 is another tie between the Amazon exclusive 3-pack Venom and Retro Collection Venom. Created by Todd McFarlane and David Michelini, Venom would make his debut in The Amazing Spider-Man number 300 in May 1988. And then 7 years later, Venom would make his first cameo appearance in the Spider-Man animated series in the episode The Alien Costume Part 2 on May 6th, 1995. He would make his first full appearance in The Alien Costume Part 3, which aired on May 13th, 1995. Yeah, another tie. I'm so sorry, everyone. I just couldn't choose between these two, and for good reason. Both are entirely different representations of Venom, yet both bring their own unique charm to the table. The 3-pack version being a much more traditional look, and Retro being that iconic red and blue cel-shaded look from the animated series. The paint apps for both versions are top notch. Only complaint there is that it chips off a little easily, the symbol from that ab crunch. That is something to look out for if you're planning on getting either of these guys. But if you're careful, you shouldn't have to worry at all. The proportions of this figure are spot on. He has such a massive frame. However, it doesn't hinder the articulation at all, as he is very flexible and is able to pop into some dynamic poses very easily. This figure, of course, is using the Omega Red body, which is just a super underrated body mold. One of the all-time greats. I think the head sculpts for each version are also well done. I love the one from the 3-pack showing Eddie Brock's face underneath the symbiote, and the Venomed out face looks great as well. However, I think I like the animated version better with those little snake eyes that he has. But yeah, I actually haven't opened my Retro Collection Venom, and I probably never will. It just looks way too cool in the box. I mean, honestly, could I put a figure as the greatest Spider-Man villain of all time without even opening it or posing it around? That right there is up for debate. But yeah, these are a tie because they're just so similar, the sculpt and everything else. I just had to lump them in together. They are, overall, these are the two best Marvel Legends Spider-Man villain figures of all time, without a doubt. And there you have it, the top 10 best Marvel Legends Spider-Man villain figures of all time. Did I miss out on any figures you thought deserved to be on the list? Let me know in the comments section below. I love reading your guys' feedback. And if you're still watching this, let me know what I should work on next. You know, I'm thinking either like top 10 Avengers or top 10 Avengers villains, maybe even going back to Spider-Man and doing a top 10 of Spider-Man figures that aren't Peter Parker, as a majority of my top 10 Spider-Man figures were just him. Or perhaps a top 10 Marvel Legends Wolverine figures. Yeah, I don't know. Let me know, guys. But yeah, that'll do for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, subscribe. Of course, share with a friend or a family member. You know, making these lists is a lot of work. So yeah, that would be just greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. But with that, I'll see you in the next one.